Imagine looking at the financial statements of a darling tech company, right? Like a company everyone loves.
Mm-hmm.
And you discover nearly $4 billion, billion with a B, in looming debt.
Just sitting there.
Exactly, just sitting there.
Yeah.
But they're legally allowed to hide it from their primary balance sheet.
Which is just wild to think about.
It's completely insane. And, while you're trying to do the math on that, the CEO is quietly selling off like 5,000 shares of his own stock every single week.
Yeah, just steadily offloading it.
Right. And meanwhile, the company announces a 60% price hike overnight.
Out of nowhere.
Literally overnight.
Yeah.
Just infuriating their core customer base.
Yeah.
Causing nearly 1 million people to cancel their service and sending the stock plummeting to half its value in a matter of weeks.
I mean, it sounds like the final days of a catastrophic corporate fraud. Like a company in a complete death spiral,
But it wasn't. That was Netflix in 2011. And rather than a death spiral, what we're actually looking at is, well, one of the most ruthless, calculated, and honestly terrifying business pivots in modern history.
Oh, absolutely.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to dissect a really fascinating 2011 Harvard Business School case study. It's titled Netflix, Valuing a New Business Model.
Right, and it's a great one.
It is. We are going to look at the exact 12-month period where Netflix willingly torched their own wildly profitable empire to chase a future that honestly hadn't even arrived yet.
Yeah, we are basically dissecting the mechanics of survival here. Because to understand how you consume media today, as a listener tuning in right now, you really have to understand the crucible of 2011.
Yeah, the turning point.
Exactly, because the transition Netflix made wasn't just like a technology upgrade from physical discs to digital streams.
Right, it was way bigger than that.
It required fundamentally rewriting their legal standing, their financial accounting, and really the psychological contract they had with millions of consumers.
Totally. So let me set the stage for you. By the end of 2011, Netflix had built a universally beloved DVD by mail service.
People love the red envelopes.
They really did. It was a money printing machine. And they decided to cannibalize it.
Which is just so rare in business.
It is. In the past, people have compared corporate transitions to, trying to rebuild an airplane while it's in flight.
Right over a canyon.
Yeah, right over a canyon while half the passengers are actively trying to jump out. But, that cliche doesn't even do this justice.
No, not at all.
What Netflix did in 2011 was more like deliberately burning down your own wildly profitable billion-dollar mansion just because you checked the weather report and saw a Category 5 hurricane coming in 5 years.
Yeah, that's a much better way to put it.
You are standing in the yard with a match while your investors and your customers are just screaming at you that the house was perfectly fine.
And doing that requires an almost, pathological level of conviction.
Yeah.
And our goal today is to look way beyond the massive consumer outrage, like the 30,000 angry blog comments and the canceled subscriptions.
We want to get under the hood.
Exactly. We want to examine the underlying architecture of that conviction. We are going to explore the century-old property laws, the highly controversial accounting loopholes, and the brutal ground war for the American living room that forced Reed Hastings to make these decisions.
Okay, so let's start at the foundation. To understand why torching the mansion was so crazy, we really have to understand how well built it was.
Oh, it was a fortress.
Right. And the case study gives us this almost cinematic origin story for Netflix. It's 1997.
Back in the VHS stage.
Yeah, exactly. And Reed Hastings, who was already a successful software entrepreneur at the time, misplaces a VHS copy of the movie Apollo 13.
A classic.
Truly. So when he finally finds it in a closet and returns it to the video store, he gets hit with a $40 late fee.
Which, was completely standard back then.
It was.
The brick-and-mortar rental industry, which was totally dominated by Blockbuster, was a $6 billion machine built fundamentally on penalizing the customer.
Yeah, the quote from Hastings in the study perfectly captures the emotion of that moment. It says, "I didn't want to tell my wife about it, and I said to myself, I'm going to compromise the integrity of my marriage over a late fee."
It's hilarious, but it's real. He was furious.
He was. And the legend goes that on his way to the gym, he realizes his gym doesn't charge him per visit.
Right, it's just a flat rate.
Exactly. He pays a flat monthly fee whether he goes 0 times or 30 times. And that sparked the idea for Netflix.
It's a great story.
It is, but okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I read that origin story, and honestly, it feels a little too neat.
It's very mythologized.
Yeah. Was the jump from a punitive late fee to a flat subscription model really that obvious of a leap for the entertainment space back then?
No, I mean, it wasn't obvious at all. In fact, it completely defied the prevailing logic of retail entertainment.
Really? How so?
Well, you have to look at the mechanics of a Blockbuster store to understand why Hastings' idea was so radical.
Okay, take me back to a Friday night at Blockbuster.
So Blockbuster operated on a model of high-friction transactions. They stocked thousands of tapes, right?
Yeah, rows and rows of them.
But the vast majority of their revenue came from Friday night new releases. Those new releases were incredibly expensive for Blockbuster to purchase from the studios.
Oh, right, because the studios want their cut.
Exactly. So to recoup that cost, they needed maximum turnover. You rent it for $3 or $4, but the real profit margin kicked in when you forgot to bring it back by Tuesday.
Ah,
They essentially weaponized human forgetfulness.
wow. So they were actively punishing their best customers.
Yeah.
Like the more you use the service, the more likely you were to get financially penalized.
Precisely. And that created a deep underlying resentment. Every time you picked up a movie box, you were making a calculated financial decision, weighing the risk of a penalty.
That is so true. I remember the stress of trying to rewind and return tapes before midnight.
Right. So what Hastings realized on his way to the gym was that a subscription model doesn't just change the billing. It alters consumer psychology.
How does it do that?
It removes the friction of the individual transaction. When you pay, say, $30 a month for unlimited DVD rentals, the payment is entirely divorced from the consumption.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Suddenly, every movie you watch feels free.
Oh, wow.
Well-
Yeah, you are removing the guilt.
Exactly.
Because if I go to Blockbuster and rent like an obscure independent film and it turns out to be terrible, I am actively angry that I wasted $4 an entire evening.
Right, you feel cheated.
But on early Netflix, if I get a bad DVD in the mail, I just put it back in the red envelope and wait for the next one.
There's no financial sting.
Right, there's no risk to trying something new, but, it wasn't just about changing how people felt about paying.
No, it went much deeper than that.
Because the case study dives deep into how the subscription model allowed Netflix to change what people were actually watching.
Yeah, and this is where Netflix really evolved from a simple logistics company into a behavioral economics powerhouse.
I love that phrasing. Behavioral economics powerhouse. Break that down for us.
So the subscription model, paired with the Netflix queue and their recommendation algorithm, allowed them to actively shift consumer demand.
Away from what Blockbuster was doing.
Exactly. Blockbuster was a slave to the Hollywood release schedule. If a new Tom Cruise movie came out, they had to buy thousands of expensive copies to meet the weekend rush.
Because that's what everyone wanted to see that exact second.
Right. But Netflix looked at their data, eventually tracking the habits of 20 million subscribers, and realized they could use recommendations to steer people away from those expensive new releases.
Wait, hold on. How does that actually work in practice? I mean, if everyone wants to see the new Blockbuster, how do you mathematically convince them to watch something else instead?
Well, it was through collaborative filtering and the actual architecture of the queue itself. The queue wasn't just a wish list, it was a buffer. If you added a brand new release to your queue, the system might say, long wait.
Oh, right. I remember those long wait tags.
Yeah. Now, in a Blockbuster, a long wait means you walk out of the store empty-handed and angry.
Because the shelf is just empty.
Exactly. But on Netflix, the algorithm immediately suggests 3 older, critically acclaimed movies from the back catalog that you can have delivered tomorrow.
Ah. And because you're paying a flat fee, you think, sure, send me the older movie. It's already paid for.
Exactly the behavior they wanted. Those back catalog movies were incredibly cheap for Netflix to acquire compared to new hits.
That is genius.
By smoothing out the demand curve distributing viewership across thousands of older titles rather than concentrating it on 10 new ones, they drastically lowered their inventory costs.
And Hastings actually had a name for this in the study, right? He called it the virtuous cycle.
Yes, the virtuous cycle.
So more subscribers generate more revenue, which buys more content, which detracts more subscribers.
But the secret engine of that cycle is that the software is actively load balancing the physical supply chain behind the scenes.
It's brilliant. It really is.
Yeah.
But that actually raises a massive question, the physical DVDs themselves.
Oh, the supply side.
Yeah. How did Netflix legally acquire millions of physical discs to rent out in the first place?
That is a great question.
Because the answer to this is the absolute bedrock of their entire early empire. And, spoiler alert, it's the exact thing they had to abandon to survive later on.
Right. The foundation of Netflix's physical DVD business rested entirely on a massive legal loophole, or, well, more accurately, a fundamental piece of American property law.
I was blown away when I read this part.
It's a concept established by the Supreme Court way back in 1908. It's called the first sale doctrine.
Yes, this was the most mind-blowing part of the source material for me.
It really changes how you view retail.
It does. Because the first sale doctrine basically says that once a copyright owner, like a massive movie studio, sells a physical copy of their work, they permanently lose the right to control the distribution of that specific physical copy.
Yes, they get paid once, and that's it.
So an ordinary person could just walk into a Best Buy, purchase a DVD for $15, and then turn around and rent it out to 100 different people.
And the movie studio has absolutely no legal right to stop them.
None. They can't demand a cut of the rental fees. U.S. property law literally says, you bought the plastic disc. You own the plastic disc.
It totally separates the copyright of the story itself from the ownership of the physical medium it's printed on.
It's wild. As Hastings explained in the case study, U.S. laws enabled anyone to place retail DVDs into a rental library without needing a single license from the content owner.
Right, zero licensing required.
I mean, think about it. It's like starting a massive nationwide car rental agency by just walking into a local Ford dealership, paying retail price for a fleet of sedans, and then renting them out by the day.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Ford might be furious that they aren't getting a cut of your daily rental business, but legally, they can't do a thing about it. You bought the cars, you can rent them out.
Exactly. U.S. property law was Netflix's ultimate shield. It protected them from the studios.
And in the very early days, that is precisely what Netflix did, right?
Yeah, they literally just bought DVDs from distributors at standard retail prices. But by the year 2000, they ran into a really severe scaling issue.
What happened?
Well, even with the algorithm pushing all those back catalog titles we talked about, they still needed copies of the massive hit movies.
Because eventually, people do want to watch the new Tom Cruise movie.
Right. And buying those hits at retail prices meant they just couldn't afford enough inventory to meet the sheer volume of demand.
Ah, so the long wait problem was creeping back in.
Exactly. Customers were facing massive wait times in their queues, and as a result, cancellation rates started creeping up.
People were getting frustrated.
Yeah. So to fix the bottleneck, Netflix had to make kind of a deal with the devil. They approached the movie studios directly to negotiate what were called revenue-sharing agreements.
Okay, hold on, wait. Why would Netflix voluntarily negotiate with the studios and give up their profits if the first sale doctrine explicitly meant they didn't have to?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. Why invite the angry studios into your business?
Because the math of customer retention demanded it.
Okay, explain that.
Under a revenue-sharing deal, the studios agreed to sell Netflix the physical DVDs at a massive upfront discount.
Like how massive?
We are talking maybe a few dollars per disc instead of $15 or $20.
Wow, okay, that's huge.
But in exchange, Netflix had to give the studio a percentage of the revenue every single time that specific disc was rented out to a customer.
So they basically traded a high fixed upfront cost for a variable ongoing cost.
Correct. And Hastings actually admitted in the study that under this revenue-sharing model, Netflix actually ended up paying about 20% more overall for their content over the lifespan of a disc.
Wait, 20% more compared to just buying it at retail in a store?
Yes.
That seems like a terrible deal.
On paper, it does.
I mean, you are paying 20% more just to partner with companies that view you as a parasite. Why do that?
It looks terrible on a per-disc basis, sure, but it was an absolute masterstroke for scaling the overall business.
How so?
Because the upfront cost was so incredibly low, Netflix could afford to buy 2 or 3 times as many copies of a hit movie on day one.
Oh, so they just flooded their own warehouses with inventory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the long wait messages completely disappeared from the queue.
Wow.
When a customer wanted a movie, it was in stock, and it shipped the next day. Customer satisfaction skyrocketed, and churn, which is the rate at which people cancel their subscriptions, just plummeted.
So the lifetime value of keeping a happy subscriber far outweighed the extra 20% they were paying the studios over time.
Exactly. It was a trade-off that saved the company's growth curve.
And the beauty of it is that the cost remained entirely variable. Like, if a movie was a total dud and nobody rented it, Netflix didn't owe the studio any ongoing revenue share.
Right. They only paid when a customer was actively using the service and driving value.
And lurking behind all these delicate negotiations was the ultimate trump card, right? U.S. property law.
The first sale doctrine, always there in the background.
Yes. Because if a studio ever got greedy and demanded, like an exorbitant revenue cut, Netflix could simply walk away from the negotiating table, drive down to Walmart, buy the DVDs at retail, and fall back on their legal shield.
They had massive leverage.
It's incredible. They had a legally protected, variable cost, highly predictable business model.
Which is, frankly, the holy grail for Wall Street. Investors love predictable, variable cost businesses that are protected by structural legal advantages.
Right. And by 2011, this machine was generating billions of dollars in revenue.
Billions.
Which brings us to the great pivot, the valley of death.
Here we go.
Why fix what is so obviously, spectacularly not broken?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
I mean, in the source text, we see Hastings basically telegraphing this move for a decade. He was talking about streaming as early as 2001.
Right, way before the technology was even viable.
There's a quote from him in 2007 where he says, "We named the company Netflix for a reason. We didn't name it DVDs by mail."
The intention was literally written into the corporate letterhead.
Exactly. It was always the plan.
Hastings possessed an intense, clear-eyed view of technological obsolescence. He looked at the data and saw that the physical DVD rental industry as a whole was shrinking.
How fast was it shrinking?
It was dropping at about a 10% annual rate between 2006 and 2011.
Wow.
Yeah. Even though Netflix was taking massive market share away from Blockbuster, the total pie itself was getting smaller every year. He knew physical media was a dying format.
But what makes this transition so fascinating and so incredibly dangerous is that shifting to streaming wasn't just a matter of changing delivery mechanisms.
No, not at all.
It wasn't just switching from mail trucks to fiber optic cables.
Right. It required completely destroying the financial and legal DNA that made Netflix successful in the first place.
Because you can't mail a stream.
Exactly. And because of that, the first sale doctrine evaporates.
It's completely gone.
Entirely. The first sale doctrine explicitly applies only to physical objects. It does not apply to digital files, data streams, or public performances.
Wow.
The moment Netflix decided to beam a movie over the internet, their century-old legal shield vanished overnight.
So they were totally exposed.
You cannot stream a copyrighted work without securing a direct, explicit licensing agreement from the copyright holder.
So Netflix was suddenly thrust out of the safety of U.S. property law and thrown into the brutal arena of contract law.
Exactly. And they had to negotiate with people who hated them.
Right. And here is where the irony becomes basically suffocating. The entities holding those digital streaming rights, the major Hollywood studios and premium cable networks like HBO and Showtime, were the very companies that Netflix was rapidly starting to compete against for human attention.
Yeah, the dynamic completely flipped.
So put yourself in their shoes for a second. If I am the CEO of a premium cable channel and I see Netflix amassing an army of 20 million subscribers, why on earth would I sign a contract to license my best television shows to the exact company that is actively trying to make my cable channel obsolete?
You wouldn't. I mean, unless they offered you a deal that fundamentally shifted all the risk off your plate. To convince these deeply skeptical, highly threatened content owners to hand over the digital rights, Netflix had to completely abandon their comfortable, variable cost revenue sharing model.
Because the studios wouldn't accept that for digital.
No, the studios saw the writing on the wall. They demanded fixed price, fixed length contracts for streaming rights.
Meaning, Netflix pays a massive, flat fee upfront, regardless of whether one person watches the movie or 10 million people watch it.
Precisely. The studios might make less total upside compared to a massive blockbuster hit on a revenue share model, but they bore absolutely zero risk.
Wow.
If Netflix's streaming platform suffered a massive technical failure, or if they lost half their subscriber base overnight, it didn't matter.
The studios still get paid?
Yes. Netflix legally owed the studios hundreds of millions of dollars on those contracts, no matter what.
So the risk of the entire entertainment ecosystem was essentially transferred from the studios directly onto Netflix's balance sheet.
You got it.
And, as if taking on billions in fixed legal liabilities wasn't terrifying enough, they were also crashing into a massive infrastructure wall at the exact same time.
Oh, the bandwidth issue.
Yes. The source provides a statistic that is almost hard to comprehend. By the autumn of 2011, Netflix streaming accounted for almost 33% of peak hours internet bandwidth used globally.
Which is just an astronomical number.
One-third. One-third of the entire internet's traffic capacity during prime time was just people watching Netflix.
Yeah. And that triggered a secondary existential threat from the internet service providers, the ISPs.
Right, because they're the ones maintaining the pipes.
Exactly. Companies like Comcast and AT&T were watching their networks get completely saturated by a single company's video traffic.
I'm sure they weren't happy about that.
Not at all. Analysts were sounding alarm bells that ISPs would begin throttling Netflix's data speeds.
Basically slowing down the movies so they buffer constantly.
Right. Or worse, demanding massive extortion fees just to allow Netflix's content to reach the consumer's house in the first place.
So to recap the nightmare, Netflix is facing hostile Hollywood studios demanding exorbitant fixed fees. They are facing hostile internet providers threatening to cut off their distribution pipes. And they have a massive consumer base that is completely comfortable with and loyal to physical plastic discs.
It is a terrifying corner to be backed into.
Truly. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the obvious question is, with all these massive new fixed costs and the complete loss of their legal safety net, how did Netflix convince Wall Street that they weren't just driving the company straight off a cliff?
Yeah, how did they keep the stock price up?
Exactly. And the answer lies in the deeply opaque, highly controversial world of corporate accounting, specifically a standard called FAS 63.
I know that bringing up accounting standards usually causes people to immediately tune out.
Stick with us, it's worth it.
It really is, because in this specific case, understanding FAS 63 is the decoder ring for understanding how Netflix actually survived 2011.
Okay, so what is it?
FAS 63 is a standard issued by the Financial Accounting Standards Board. It was originally designed decades ago for traditional television broadcasters like CBS or NBC.
Okay.
It dictates how they account for the licensing agreements of the shows they air. Basically, it outlines the specific rules for when you are allowed to count a licensed digital file as a tangible asset on your balance sheet.
Right. And the case study is very explicit about these rules. For Netflix to claim a streaming license as an asset, 3 strict criteria must be met simultaneously.
3 rules.
Rule number 1.
Yeah.
The cost of the title has to be known or reasonably determinable. Rule number 2. The title, meaning the actual digital source file, must have been physically received by Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And rule number 3. The title has to be available for its first showing to the public.
Right.
If and only if a piece of content meets all 3 of these rules, it goes onto the balance sheet as an asset and onto the income statement as an expense to be amortized.
Yeah.
But why these specific rules? Like, what is the spirit of this accounting law?
The spirit of the law is essentially to prevent companies from inflating their value with ghost assets.
Ghost assets.
Yeah, you can't tell your investors that you own a $100 million asset if the movie hasn't even finished filming yet, or if the studio hasn't actually delivered the tape to your server room.
Right, that makes sense. It has to be real.
Exactly. It enforces a strict reality check on digital goods. But the real battleground for Netflix wasn't just what counted as an asset. It was how those assets were depreciated over time.
Depreciation.
Yes. That word amortization became the absolute center of a vicious philosophical war among financial analysts.
Okay, so let's compare the math here because the contrast is stark.
Yeah.
In the DVD era, Netflix amortized, or basically wrote off the cost of, their physical discs incredibly aggressively.
Because discs get scratched and lost.
Exactly. They used an accelerated basis, usually over 1 to 3 years. They operated on the realistic assumption that a brand new release loses most of its value and rental appeal after the first year.
Which is true. Nobody is clamoring for a year-old blockbuster.
Right. And even a classic movie is basically worn out or forgotten after 3 years of circulating in the mail.
Yeah.
This meant they were taking a fast, heavy write-off of about 40% of their physical asset value every single quarter. They took the financial hit up front.
But when they pivoted to streaming, the accounting rules completely changed.
Because it's a digital file, it doesn't degrade.
Right. And because they were signing massive 3 to 5 year fixed contracts for digital rights, they began amortizing the cost of that streaming content on a straight line basis over the entire lifespan of the contract.
Okay, meaning instead of taking a massive 40% hit up front, they just chop the cost into equal tiny fractions and spread it out evenly over 5 years.
Exactly.
And the case study notes that by the second quarter of 2011, their quarterly amortization expense dropped significantly, plummeting down to just 24%.
Which made their quarterly earnings look much better.
I have to push back on this, though, because looking at those numbers, it feels incredibly shady.
A lot of people thought so.
I mean, it's like going to a bank and taking out a massive 5-year car loan on a vehicle that you absolutely know the transmission's going to fall out of in 2 years.
Right.
But you structure the math over 5 years anyway, just to make your monthly expense report look smaller to your spouse. Are you telling me the SEC just allows a company to artificially smooth out their massive expenses like that?
Well, that exact skepticism is what fueled the entire bear thesis among Wall Street analysts who were betting against Netflix at the time.
The critics.
Yes. The critics argued that this straight-line amortization was a complete mirage. They argued it artificially inflated Netflix's perceived profitability, eroding the actual quality of their earnings.
Because the money is still leaving the building, right?
Exactly. The bears pointed to the cash flow statement, which tells the unvarnished truth of money entering and leaving the building.
You can't hide cash.
Right. And there was a massive growing chasm between the actual cash flying out the door to pay the Hollywood studios and the smoothed out accrual earnings Netflix was officially reporting on their income statement.
So the cash is hemorrhaging, but the official report card says they're making a healthy profit. And the text actually provides a terrifying operational detail to back up the bears' panic. Netflix was essentially using the movie studios as a credit card to float their expansion.
Oh, the accounts payable.
Yes. Their accounts payable, the amount of time it took them to actually pay their bills, were stretching dangerously. They went from paying invoices in 35 days to stretching them out to 72 days.
More than double.
They hadn't delayed payments like that since they were a struggling startup going public back in 2002.
And that is a classic sign of a company facing a severe liquidity crunch.
Running out of cash.
Yeah. However, to maintain impartiality here, we have to examine the bull view, too.
The analysts who passionately defended Netflix's accounting.
Right. The supporters argued that straight-line amortization over a 5-year contract wasn't a deception at all. They claimed it was actually a highly conservative approach based on the mechanics of hypergrowth.
Okay, how can delaying your massive expenses possibly be considered conservative?
Because of the denominator.
What do you mean?
Well, if you assume Netflix is going to continuously add millions of new subscribers every single year.
Which was their whole plan.
Exactly. Then taking straight-line amortization hits today against a much smaller revenue base means they're absorbing a disproportionate amount of the pain early on.
Oh, I see.
Right. Fast forward to years 3, 4, and 5 of those contracts. The fixed amortization cost stays exactly the same, but the subscriber revenue has doubled or maybe tripled.
Because they have way more paying customers.
Yes. This creates massive operating leverage, meaning they will look incredibly sustainably profitable in the future.
So it's a monumental gamble on uninterrupted exponential growth.
A huge gamble.
If the subscriber growth ever stalls out or goes backward even a little bit, the entire mathematical model collapses under the weight of those fixed costs.
Exactly.
And the anxiety over that fragile math was massively amplified by what I can only call the $3.9 billion shadow.
Yeah, this is the really scary part of the balance sheet.
Tell me about it.
This is where we return to those 3 strict criteria of FAS 63. Cost known, file received, available for showing.
Right.
Netflix was aggressively signing massive, multi-year deals for future content to lock up the streaming rights before their competitors could get to them.
They were buying everything they could.
We are talking about movies that were still in theaters or television seasons that hadn't even been written yet.
Oh, wow.
And because that future content hadn't been physically received by Netflix and wasn't available for showing, it did not meet the legal criteria to be classified as an asset under FAS 63.
Which means legally, the financial obligation to pay for that content didn't have to be listed on the official balance sheet.
Correct.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Exhibit 5 in the text lays this bare. As of the end of 2011, Netflix had accumulated $3.9 billion in contractual obligations for future streaming content that were practically invisible to a casual observer glancing at the main balance sheet.
It was essentially a hidden mountain of debt.
Netflix literally buried a tiny note deep in their SEC filings that essentially said, these amounts are not reflected on the balance sheet. However, Such amounts are expected to be significant.
Talk about an understatement.
Significant is doing a lot of heavy lifting for $4 billion.
It really is. And you know, what's fascinating here is how this looming shadow of unseen liabilities influenced the psychology and behavior of Netflix's own leadership team.
Oh, the stock selling.
Yes. The case study highlights that financial analysts were becoming increasingly unnerved by the high volume of insider trading.
Wasn't a good look.
No. Reed Hastings himself, the architect of this entire pivot, was executing pre-planned stock sales of about 5,000 shares of his own company every single week for months.
Well, he wasn't the only one, right?
Right. Other C-suite executives were also aggressively dumping their stock options at the same time.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of an investor. You're looking at accounts payable stretching out to 72 days.
Red flag number one.
Right. Then you uncover nearly $4 billion in hidden future liabilities buried in the footnotes.
Red flag number two.
And you see the CEO and his top lieutenants quietly selling off thousands of shares of stock every single week.
It is no wonder Wall Street was hovering their hands over the panic button.
It painted a picture of executives who knew the hull of the ship had been breached and were quietly heading for the lifeboats.
It really did. But, you know, while the financial analysts were sweating over these deeply concerning SEC filings and accounting models, Netflix was simultaneously fighting a brutal multi-front ground war for the actual consumers.
Because if they lose the subscribers, it's game over.
Exactly. Because without massive continued subscriber growth, none of the accounting magic mattered. The whole bull thesis falls apart.
Which brings us to the operational reality of scale, churn, and the literal war for the living room.
Yes.
And the numbers in the text regarding their customer base are staggering.
Let's talk about the 45% churn rate.
This is a crazy metric. Analysts estimated that Netflix's annual subscriber churn approached 45%. That means if you take a snapshot of their customer base on January 1st, almost half of those exact people will have canceled their subscription by December 31st.
Yeah, it's a massive revolving door.
I don't understand how the math of that is survivable. If you have 20 million subscribers and nearly half leave, you have to acquire roughly 9 million brand new humans every single year just to tread water, let alone grow.
Sounds impossible.
How does a company survive that kind of exodus?
Well, they survived because the churn wasn't entirely permanent, and it was actually engineered by the specific mechanics of streaming subscriptions.
Engineered.
Unlike a magazine subscription or like a gym membership where you sign an annual contract and face steep cancellation fees,
Right.
Netflix was entirely month to month.
Right.
And more importantly, they made the act of cancellation completely frictionless. When a user clicked unsubscribe, Netflix didn't nuke their account.
They kept the data.
Exactly. They deliberately saved the user's queue, their viewing history, and their personalized algorithm preferences.
So it wasn't a burned bridge. It was just hitting pause.
Right. But it created a massive behavioral loophole.
The free month.
Yes. Netflix aggressively marketed a free first month to acquire new users. Consumers quickly realized they could sign up, binge watch an entire season of a specific show over 3 weeks, cancel with one click, and pay absolutely nothing.
That is so true. People definitely did that.
And then, you know, a few months later when a new show dropped, they would simply resubscribe using a different email address or a different credit card to get another free month.
So that 45% churn figure isn't necessarily 45% of the population decided that Netflix is a terrible product and walking away forever.
No, not at all.
A huge chunk of that is the exact same opportunistic people cycling in and out of the service based on whatever content is hot that month.
Exactly. But even if they come back, the economics of that behavior are brutal. Because your customer acquisition costs, the marketing money you spend to get someone to sign up remains high, while the lifetime value of that customer keeps getting interrupted.
Oh, I see.
Netflix's survival relied entirely on leveraging their core base of 20 million active users to generate the steady monthly cash flow necessary to service those massive fixed-cost streaming contracts.
Right. If the churn rate ever truly outpaced the acquisition rate, the cash flow would dry up and the $4 billion in shadow debt would crush them.
And they had to maintain that fragile equilibrium while fighting what analysts recognize as a five-front war for the consumer's attention.
Because Netflix was not operating in a vacuum.
Not at all.
Let's lay out the battlefield, because they were totally surrounded. On the physical media flank, you had Redbox.
Oh, yeah. Redbox is huge.
They were aggressively installing 30,000 automated DVD kiosks across the country, charging just $1 a day for rentals. And crucially, they put these kiosks directly inside grocery stores and pharmacies where people were already running errands.
Super convenient.
Very. Then, on the ad-supported flank, you had Hulu, which was a terrifying joint venture funded by massive media conglomerates like NBC, Universal, News Corp, and Disney.
Basically the entire old guard.
Right. And they were offering next-day TV shows for free with commercials. You also had YouTube providing an infinite bottomless supply of free user-generated video.
Taking up massive amounts of screen time.
Exactly. Then, on the digital transactional flank, you had Apple's iTunes and Amazon, where consumers could just rent or buy exactly the movie they wanted a la carte without committing to a monthly subscription.
It was a formidable array of competitors, but honestly, none of those represented the existential threat that truly terrified Netflix's leadership.
Right. The text pinpoints the final boss of this war.
Yes.
The premium cable subscription services that were transitioning into what was called TV everywhere. We're talking specifically about HBO with their newly launched HBO Go app, and Showtime with Showtime Anytime.
The absolute heavyweights.
But why were they considered the ultimate threat? I mean, they were just traditional cable channels.
Because they possess the one strategic asset Netflix was bleeding cash trying to acquire: proprietary premium content backed by deep pockets.
Ah, they didn't have to license it.
Exactly. HBO and Showtime didn't need to go into massive debt negotiating with studios for streaming rights. They were the studios.
They owned it all outright.
They owned the rights to massively popular cultural touchstones. The case study specifically names Sex and the City on HBO and Weeds on Showtime.
Huge shows.
Massive. Furthermore, the economics of their business model were entirely different from Netflix's.
Because of the cable money.
Right. These networks were already bankrolled by the massive recurring revenue of traditional cable television subscriptions.
They didn't need their streaming apps to be profitable standalone businesses.
Not at all. They offered HBO Go and Showtime Anytime as a completely free add-on to their existing cable subscribers.
Wow. That is a brutal competitive disadvantage.
It's almost unfair.
I mean, Netflix is out there trying to convince consumers to take out their credit cards and sign up for a brand new monthly bill.
While HBO is basically telling consumers, hey, you already pay for cable, so here is a world-class streaming app filled with premium content, and it costs you absolutely nothing extra.
Free.
Free.
So faced with this reality, the mounting fixed costs of licensing, the terrifying $4 billion in off-balance sheet liabilities, a 45% churn rate, and a brutal war against competitors who could offer streaming for free, Netflix desperately needed an injection of cash.
They needed to drastically increase their revenue to fund the transition to streaming.
And the way they decided to extract that money from their customers almost killed the company outright.
Yeah, we have arrived at the psychological breaking point of 2011.
This is widely studied as a masterclass in self-inflicted corporate wounds.
It really is.
Let's lay out the timeline, because the speed at which this company unravels is breathtaking.
It happens so fast.
It is July 12, 2011. Netflix is on top of the world. The stock is flying incredibly high, trading at $291 a share.
On stock.
Right. And at this exact moment, the most popular plan they offer is an unbelievable value. For $9.99 a month, you get unlimited digital streaming and unlimited physical DVDs by mail.
One flat fee, everything included under one roof.
But on that Tuesday, Netflix abruptly announces they are unbundling the service.
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah. If you only want DVDs, the price is $7.99 a month.
Right.
If you only want digital streaming, the price is $7.99 a month.
Right.
But if you want to keep the exact same level of service you had yesterday, both DVDs and streaming, you now have to pay for both plans separately.
$7.99 plus $7.99.
Which equals $15.98 a month. That is a massive 60% price hike imposed literally overnight on their most loyal customers.
And the immediate financial and cultural fallout was severe.
I remember people losing their minds over this.
Customers were deeply insulted. Over the next few weeks, almost 1 million subscribers canceled their service in protest.
1 million?
Yes. And the stock price, which had been the invincible darling of Wall Street, began a swift, brutal decline. It dropped roughly 3% every single week as the market absorbed the reality of the churn.
But Reed Hastings doesn't back down.
Yeah, he doubles down.
Instead, he doubles down in the most spectacular, confusing way imaginable.
It's legendary.
It is September 18th, 2011.
Yeah.
The stock has already bled down to $143 a share, losing half its value.
Ouch.
Hastings publishes an infamous late-night blog post. He doesn't just stubbornly stick to the 60% price hike. He announces he is literally splitting the entire company in two.
The Quickster moment.
Yes. The digital streaming service will keep the prestigious Netflix name. The beloved DVD by mail service will be amputated and rebranded with a completely new name, Qwikster.
Spelled Qwikster.
Just terrible. And it was not merely a cosmetic name change.
No, it was structural. He announced that Qwikster would be housed on a completely independent website. It would require loyal customers to go through the friction of creating entirely new accounts.
Which is exactly what people hate doing.
It would feature separate billing, separate credit card charges, and worst of all, separate movie queues.
Ah, the queues.
The brilliant recommendation engines that powered the virtuous cycle would no longer communicate with each other.
They completely broke it. I know he did try to soften the blow by announcing Qwikster would start renting video games, something Netflix had never offered, but the structural damage was done.
Oh, totally done.
I have to use an analogy here because the absurdity of this operational move is hard to overstate.
Please do.
Imagine you have a favorite local restaurant that you've been going to for years.
Okay.
One day, the owner sends you an email saying, "Hey, we are raising the price of your usual meal by 60%. And also, starting next month, if you want to drink with your food, you have to stand up, walk out the door, cross a busy street to a completely different building, open a new tab with a different bartender, and order your drink there."
It's not just expensive, it's aggressively insulting to your time.
Yes.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of consumer psychology, the reason the public backlash was so visceral and unhinged wasn't just about the extra $6 a month.
It was about the convenience.
Exactly. It was because Hastings broke the fundamental value proposition of the entire company. Why did Netflix defeat Blockbuster in the first place? Convenience.
Right, it was easy.
It was the unified queue. It was the seamless, frictionless recommendation engine that knew exactly what you wanted to watch and delivered it to you whether it was on a plastic disc or a digital screen.
By severing the company in two, Hastings intentionally destroyed the user experience that built his empire.
And the internet absolutely exploded.
It really did. The case study notes that almost 30,000 deeply angry people commented directly on Hastings' blog post.
30,000.
And you have to remember, this was 2011, before Twitter and modern social media algorithms really optimized the modern outrage machine.
People really had to go out of their way to comment.
They were typing out paragraphs of fury, practically rioting in the comment sections, publicly announcing their cancellations.
And the market punished them mercilessly for the arrogance of the move, which leads us to the inevitable surrender.
Right. October 10th, 2011. Just 22 days after proudly announcing Qwikster to the world, Reed Hastings is forced to wave the white flag.
A very fast retreat.
The stock has plummeted to $111 a share. They have incinerated more than half of their entire market capitalization in 3 months.
Insane.
So Hastings posts a very short, deeply humbling update. He writes, "No change, one website, one account, one password." In other words, no Qwikster.
They capitulated on the brand split. They killed the Qwikster name and kept the DVD service integrated under the single Netflix website.
However, crucially, they kept the 60% price hike in place.
Yes. They got the cash flow they desperately needed to fund the streaming content, but the reputational damage was catastrophic.
The aftermath described at the end of the case study paints a picture of a company in absolute triage. By January 2012, Netflix was trading at an 18-month low.
It was bleak.
The Wall Street analysts tracking the company were in utter disarray. The text provides Exhibit 8, which is a chart showing the varying analyst price targets.
They had no idea what to do with the stock.
None. In the spring of 2011, before the price hike, everyone was universally bullish. Firms like Oppenheimer had a sky-high target of $360 a share.
By call.
But by the fall, after the Qwikster debacle, the consensus was totally shattered. The targets were wildly scattered. You had Canaccord Genuity issuing a panic sell rating with a target of just $60.
$60.
While Piper Jaffray stubbornly maintained a BUY rating at $100, nobody, not the analysts, not the consumers, and maybe not even the executives, knew how to accurately value this new, streaming-focused, heavily damaged company.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this deep dive. What we are examining in this 2011 case study is the sheer, terrifying audacity of corporate evolution.
It really is.
Netflix willingly, intentionally walked right into a valley of death. They systematically dismantled their incredibly profitable, legally protected, physically based DVD model.
They alienated their most loyal core fan base with massive price hikes.
And they absorbed billions of dollars in off-balance sheet debt, putting themselves at the absolute mercy of their direct competitors.
And they endured all of this trauma simply because Reed Hastings looked at the technological horizon and believed, with an absolute unshakable conviction, that physical media was doomed and that streaming was the only paradigm that would matter in the future.
And that is the analytical question I want to pose to you, the listener, as you reflect on your own career, your own business, or your own life strategy. Are you holding on to your personal DVD by mail model just because it feels highly profitable and safe today? Are you relying on the comfort of old rules and variable costs?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. And more importantly, are you willing to suffer the intense short-term agony of a quickster mistake, to look foolish, to lose ground, to be heavily criticized by your peers in order to secure your survival in a new paradigm that hasn't fully arrived yet?
Because Netflix was willing to take the beating, and by doing so, they completely reshaped the global media landscape.
They absolutely did.
So what does this all mean? We've spent the last hour meticulously unpacking FAS 63 accounting loopholes, the behavioral economics of late fees, the math of subscriber churn, and the psychology of stock crashes.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. But I want to leave you with a final thought that isn't explicitly spelled out in the Harvard Business School case study, but is deeply, profoundly tied to the shift from the physical first sale doctrine to the digital streaming model we just dissected.
Oh, this is a good point.
Think about your own digital life right now. Because of the massive, painful shift that Netflix accelerated in 2011, we as a society made a collective, unspoken bargain.
We traded away a lot.
We voluntarily traded the first sale doctrine for convenience. We surrendered the fundamental, legal right to physically own our media. We gave up the ability to buy a movie and keep it forever, to lend a DVD to a friend when they're sick, or to sell our old collection at a garage sale.
It's all gone.
We traded all of those century-old property rights for the frictionless ease of a flat monthly subscription fee. We now live in a modern landscape where we essentially rent our entire culture from a handful of massive tech giants.
Yeah, you don't actually own your movies anymore.
If a streaming platform loses a licensing agreement, or if a media conglomerate decides to permanently delete a television show for a corporate tax write-off, that piece of art simply vanishes from the digital ecosystem.
It just disappears.
You can't go to your physical bookshelf and find it. We have been granted infinite magical access to the world's entertainment, but we have accepted zero actual ownership of it. And as you hit play on your next streaming binge tonight, mindlessly scrolling through that endless digital queue, you have to ask yourself, was the trade-off worth it?
That's something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an incredible journey through a corporate valley of death, and we appreciate you taking the time to unpack the mechanics of it with us. We'll see you next time.